Story 1. The janitor who never clocks out. Airports are supposed to be safe, right? But at 1:43 a.m., alone at gate C-19, I learned some people never really clock out. 1:43 a.m. Gate C-19 was dead quiet, the kind of silence that buzzes in your ears. Every shop in the terminal was locked down, the lights above dimmed to a dull hum, but I couldn't sleep. My flight had been delayed until morning, and I was the only one stuck in that corner of the airport. I kept telling myself it was safe, airports always are, but something about being alone in a space meant for thousands gnawed at me. That's when I noticed him. A janitor in a faded uniform, mopping the same stretch of tile just a few feet from the gate. The floor was spotless, gleaming under the fluorescence, yet he dragged the mop back and forth with slow, deliberate strokes. The squeak of the mop head echoed louder than it should have in the empty space, so constant it began to feel like breathing that wasn't mine. At first I figured he was killing time, maybe bored on a graveyard shift. But the sound kept going even when the mop's head was bone dry, dragging against the polished tiles like rubber on glass. I leaned forward and saw the bucket beside him. Empty. Bone empty. No water, no suds, not even a damp shine on the rim. Yet the mop left streaks across the same patch of floor over and over, as if something invisible needed scrubbing away. I shifted in my seat and noticed the yellow caution, wet floor sign standing a few feet from me. I swear it had been closer to the janitor's side a moment ago. I told myself I just hadn't paid attention. Easy mistake in the half-sleep haze, but when I blinked again, the sign was angled toward my row of chairs, its black stick figure slipping on an unseen puddle. Like it was facing me. The squeaking grew louder as he worked his way down the row, but his pace never changed. No glances in my direction. No break in the rhythm. Just the slow scrape of the mop across tiles that didn't need cleaning. My phone battery was nearly dead, and for a second I thought about filming him, but something about that felt wrong. Like if I acknowledged him through a screen, I'd make it worse. When I looked back at the floor sign, it had moved again. Now it stood directly in front of my seat, bright yellow against the gray tiles, as if warning me not to stand up. My mouth went dry. I hadn't heard it drag across the floor, hadn't seen him touch it, but there it was. I pushed it aside with my foot, the hollow plastic clattering louder than I expected. The janitor's mop froze mid-stroke. He didn't look up right away. The mop just hovered over the tiles, dripping nothing, while I sat frozen with my foot still pressed against the sign. Then, slowly, his head tilted. Not a turn, not a nod, just a tilt too far to be natural. His face stayed shadowed under the fluorescent light, but I caught the outline of a smile, stretched longer than it should have been. I stood, trying to act casual, pretending to stretch my legs. The sign toppled over as I moved, landing flat on the floor between us. He placed the mop upright in the bucket, though it was still empty, and started rolling it toward me. The wheels squealed on the polished tiles, echoing through the empty gate. Each push brought him closer, and the only way out was the lit corridor behind him. I waited for him to veer off, maybe turn down another row, but he stopped just short of me. The mop handle slid out of the bucket with a dry rasp, and he leaned it against his shoulder like a spear. His other hand gripped the sign I'd kicked aside and set it back upright, this time planted directly in front of my knees. No words. Just the wet squeak of the mop head dragging once more across bone-dry tile. I tried to slip past, heading for the corridor where the lights still burned. But before I could, he shifted sideways, blocking the path. The mop hung loose in his grip, yet drops of water pattered onto the floor. I glanced into the bucket. It was still empty, dry enough that the plastic had begun to crack. My chest tightened as I realized the drips weren't coming from the mop at all. I stepped forward anyway, hoping he'd move aside, but he didn't. His eyes were hidden beneath the shadow of his cap, yet I could feel them locked on me. When I reached for the narrow gap between him and the wall, the mop handle slammed down across the tiles, inches from my shoes. The crack of wood against ceramic echoed like a gunshot. I froze, too stunned to breathe. Would you have stayed in your seat, or moved past him. I don't remember how I got out. I just know I ended up in a different terminal, shaking with no clear memory of crossing the corridor. Later, when I asked security about gate C19, they pulled the camera feed. The footage showed me sitting alone for hours, no one else in frame. No janitor, no mop, no moving sign. Just me, staring at an empty stretch of tile that I swear was never clean. Story 2. The man in the glass corridor. Airports at night are supposed to feel safe. Bright lights, security cameras, staff moving around. But at 2 a.m. in an empty gate with half the lights dead, safety feels like a memory, and glass doesn't always keep things out. 2:11 a.m. Gate B07. I was slumped in a stiff plastic chair with my carry-on under my legs when I noticed it. Movement in the glass corridor that connected this wing to the closed one. Half the overhead lights in that tunnel were dead, leaving stretches of dim reflection broken by pale fluorescent patches. At first I thought it was just me shifting, catching my own reflection at a weird angle. But then, the figure kept pacing back and forth, steady as a metronome. That corridor was locked at night. I'd seen the janitor swipe out an hour earlier, and the heavy door had clicked shut. A glowing red keypad sat beside it, the kind of panel you only ever saw staff use. Yet the man inside kept turning toward it, tapping his finger on the glass as if pointing me to look. The sound carried faintly, tap, 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 each one sharper than it should have been in the empty terminal. I sat up straighter, rubbing my eyes. Maybe he was a stranded passenger who had wandered past a gate he shouldn't have. But the way he moved didn't match that. His pacing was too measured, too exact, like he was rehearsing steps rather than killing time. When he stopped, he faced me directly, though the glass between us blurred the details. His mouth formed words I couldn't hear. Silent syllables, repeated again and again, each time punctuated by him jabbing a finger toward the keypad. I shook my head, mouthing back that I couldn't hear him. He didn't seem frustrated. Instead, he pressed his palm flat against the glass, right by the keypad, and held it there. A greasy outline bloomed under the light, a handprint that hadn't been there before. Something about that simple mark made my stomach tighten. It wasn't just a request for help. It felt like an instruction. I glanced around the gate area, hoping someone else was awake to see this. A couple of travelers were slumped in their seats, earbuds in, eyes shut. No one stirred. For a second I thought about getting up, maybe finding an attendant, but the info desk was dark and unmanned. The airport at that hour had a strange weight to it, like the whole place was asleep and I wasn't supposed to be moving either. When I turned back, the man had stopped pacing. He stood perfectly still, his head tilted slightly, his face half lit by the working bulbs above. Then, with slow precision, he lifted his hand and began pressing invisible keys on the other side of the panel. The keypad beside the locked door flickered to life, its red numbers glowing in the dark. One by one I saw the digits light up. From inside, my chest tightened. I knew the keypad shouldn't respond without a valid swipe first, but the lights glowed anyway, as if invisible fingers were inside the wiring. 7, pause, then 7 again. Each beep echoed faintly through the empty gate area, too loud against the silence. The man's lips kept moving, silent words spilling out like a rehearsed chant, eyes locked on me through the glass. I gripped the armrest of my chair, torn between getting up to stop it and staying absolutely still. The keypad gave a dull buzz, wrong code. Relief washed over me, thin and temporary. But instead of reacting, the man only tilted his head further, the corners of his mouth twitching upward in a smile that didn't fit the silence. His hand hovered, ready to try again. I whispered to myself, "Don't," as if the sound might carry through the glass. But the corridor stayed hushed, his motions deliberate. He tried another sequence, 2, 9. This time the keypad didn't buzz. Instead, it gave a soft, mechanical click, the kind I'd only heard when staff opened those doors. The man stepped back, just enough that his full figure fit in the frame of light, and he waited. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. I thought about grabbing my bag and walking fast to another gate, but some awful instinct kept me rooted. The door latch made a sharp metallic snap. My breath caught. I swear I saw the door ease open by an inch, though the man hadn't touched it. He just stared at me through the seam, eyes unblinking, lips parting like he was about to speak. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my bag and stood, backing away until I reached the vending machines. The corridor door creaked wider, slow, deliberate like a test. I turned to leave, just get to another wing, maybe even outside, anywhere but here. But when I glanced back over my shoulder, the glass caught my reflection. Only mine. The corridor behind it was empty. The keypad light still glowed red, casting a faint tremor across the polished floor. My reflection looked wrong. My body in the chair, still slumped where I'd been minutes ago, while I stood frozen yards away. I couldn't breathe. I still don't know if I ever left that gate. Would you wait for your flight, knowing he's free? Story 3. The chair that kept turning. Airports are supposed to be safe. Bright, sterile, filled with cameras and people. But at 3 in the morning, when the crowds are gone and every sound echoes too long, the emptiness feels alive. That's when I learned that sometimes, even an empty seat can be watching you. 3:27 a.m. Gate A14. The monitors above me flickered between weather updates and delays, but the gate itself was dead silent. Rows of fixed plastic seats stretched across the waiting area like empty pews. Only one object stood apart from that grid, an old black swivel chair, the kind staff used at the counter. I noticed it right away because it didn't match and because it turned, slowly, halfway. Then it stopped. I sat 2 rows back, backpack on my lap, trying to pretend it was nothing. Maybe the air vents. But the vents weren't humming. The entire terminal seemed suspended. No music, no chatter, just the faint buzz of fluorescent tubes. I stared at the chair until my eyes watered, waiting for movement that didn't come, until it did, a soft, deliberate pivot like someone had nudged it with a toe. I pulled my hoodie tighter and told myself I was overtired. Red-eye flights do that. You see shapes where there aren't any. Still, every time I blinked, the chair seemed to have shifted just slightly more toward me. Not fast, not obvious, but enough that when I looked again it was angled a little closer, like someone adjusting their seat to get a better view. I must have drifted off because when I opened my eyes again, the chair was no longer angled. It was squarely facing me. Dead on. My mouth went dry. The terminal glass behind it reflected rows of empty seats, vending machines glowing in the distance, but no figure in the chair itself. Only the chair, waiting. I rubbed my face, stood up, and paced to the window. The tarmac outside was a frozen field of sodium light, ground crews long gone. My reflection stared back at me. In the glass, slouched, tired. But behind my reflection, in the faint transparency, I caught it, the outline of someone seated in that chair. Shoulders. A head tilted. I spun around. Empty. Just the chair, perfectly still. My chest tightened. I moved closer, circling it as if to prove nothing was there. No jacket draped over the back. No bag tucked beneath. The seat cushion was smooth, untouched. Still, the air around it felt displaced, like someone had just stood up and walked off seconds before. My skin prickled, and I couldn't shake the certainty that I'd interrupted something. I forced myself back to my row and sat down, gripping the straps of my backpack like handles. The chair didn't move. Minutes bled together, marked only by the occasional click of the overhead lights. Then, soft as a breath, the swivel began again. A smooth half-circle, the base groaning faintly against the floor. It turned toward the exit aisle as if someone had just pushed off to leave. That should have calmed me. Chairs spin. That's all they do. But this one didn't stop. It rotated harder, momentum carrying it in one sharp twist until it snapped to a halt, facing the aisle that led deeper into the terminal. The sound echoed too loud for such a small movement. My ears rang with the silence that followed, heavy and expectant. I couldn't sit still anymore. I got up, half ready to march to the counter and drag that thing aside. But my legs felt weak, like I was walking into an argument I couldn't win. I edged closer, every step carrying the hollow tap of sneakers against tile. When I reached the row behind it, I stopped. The chair was angled now, not toward the aisle, not toward the counter. Toward me again. The glass wall beside us reflected the whole scene. My own pale figure standing rigid. The black chair. And then, just for a moment, another figure in the reflection, sitting there. Still, looking straight at me. My throat locked shut. I jerked my head to the left. The seat was empty. Only the chair rocked slightly, like someone had shifted their weight and vanished. I stumbled back, knocking my bag to the floor. The chair spun again, this time with force, whipping around so fast the wheels screeched against tile. It stopped facing the exit aisle, pointing straight toward the dark corridor where no flights were scheduled. My instincts screamed not to follow. I grabbed my bag, clutching the boarding pass inside, and retreated to the farthest row of seats. Would you sit, if it faced you? The first boarding announcement never came. At dawn, another flight crew arrived, lights brighter, chatter filling the gate. When I finally stood to leave, my hands trembling, I noticed something at the counter. The black swivel chair sat motionless, tucked in neatly, facing forward. And lying across its seat, folded once, was a boarding pass. My name printed on it. Story 4. The announcement that wasn't scheduled. Airports are supposed to be predictable. Screens, schedules, routines. But what do you do when a gate calls your name for a flight that doesn't exist? 12:58 a.m. Gate D23. I was the only one there. The fluorescent lights hummed above me, buzzing like tired insects. Every counter was closed, shutters rolled down. The monitors had gone dark hours ago. I leaned back in the stiff plastic chair, scrolling through my phone, waiting for my 3 a.m. connection. That was when the intercom crackled alive. The voice came through in a burst of static. Flat. Mechanical. Boarding now. Flight 033. Gate D23. My head lifted. My boarding pass was for Flight 729, not 033. I checked the screens again. Blank. The gate agent desk was deserted. Yet the intercom speaker above me glowed faintly, like it was breathing. I tried to laugh it off. Maybe a test? Some late-night system glitch? But the sound wasn't a test tone. It had weight. Like someone was speaking right above me, leaning into the mic. I pulled my hoodie tighter, suddenly aware of how empty the terminal was. Even the janitor I'd seen earlier had vanished. Then the intercom repeated the call. Louder this time. Boarding now. Flight 033. My stomach nodded. The same cadence, but different words slipped in. Passenger Matthew Cole. Proceed immediately to gate D23. That was my name. No one should have had my name. I froze in my seat. The cheap fabric squeaked under me as if the chair expected me to stand. My boarding pass was still clenched in my hand, damp with sweat. Flight 729. Not 033. I checked the departures on my phone. No listing. Not even a delay notice. Just nothing. I stood up anyway, drawn closer to the desk as if the call carried a weight I couldn't ignore. The intercom speaker above me buzzed softly. Its red indicator light blinked, steady in rhythm with my pulse. The gate door ahead, sealed metal and glass, suddenly clicked. A green light washed over the handle. I stepped closer, my sneakers echoing against the polished floor. The sound felt too loud, like I was breaking some unspoken rule of silence. The gate door stood half in shadow, the glowing green light pulsing brighter with each step I took. It reminded me of a heartbeat, but not mine. Then the intercom hissed again, sharp and close. Final boarding call. Flight 033. The static broke apart into a whisper that slid down my spine. Matthew, this is your last chance. The voice wasn't overhead anymore. It was right behind my ear. I spun around. Empty rows of chairs stretched into the dim terminal. No movement. No footsteps retreating. Just silence pressing in on every side. My throat was dry, but I couldn't swallow. The intercom speaker above still glowed faint red, as if mocking me for looking anywhere else. The gate door gave a hollow clunk. The lock released fully. A draft of cold air seeped through the seam, carrying the smell of metal and something faintly sweet, like spoiled fruit. The green light now held steady, no longer pulsing. It was waiting. I backed away, heart pounding. The whisper came again, directly into my ear, softer this time, almost coaxing. Final call. I wanted to scream that I wasn't on that flight, that no one was. But my legs wouldn't move. The gate door stood open now, spilling a pale light across the floor like a path only I was meant to follow. Would you step through that gate, if they called your name? I never did. I don't think I could have. Hours later, when real staff arrived, the monitors blinked awake. No record of Flight 033. No audio logs from the intercom. Security footage showed me sitting there, stiff, staring at the locked door the entire night. Except, the door wasn't locked in the recording. Story 5. The vending machine that refilled itself, 4:12 a.m. Gate E05. The vending machine slot never emptied. No matter how many times I reached in, the same candy bar kept sliding out, like it wanted me to take it. 4:12 a.m. Gate E05. The vending alcove buzzed louder than the rest of the empty terminal. My eyes felt like sandpaper after a red-eye connection gone wrong, and the only thing keeping me upright was the glow of the vending machine tucked in the corner. Rows of candy bars, chips, bottled sodas. All too neat. All too inviting. I slid in my cart, thinking about how pathetic it was. 32 years old, dead on my feet, negotiating with a glass box for calories. The machine whirred, clunked, and a single chocolate bar dropped into the tray. I grabbed it, tore the wrapper open with my teeth, and chewed without tasting. Hunger dulls everything. Out of habit, I looked back at the slot, and froze. The same brand, the same wrapper, had slid forward again, waiting like I'd never touched the first one. I laughed under my breath. Airports are built on glitches, lost luggage, missing connections, endless delays. Why not a vending machine that double-charged and forgot its inventory? I bent down, picked up the second bar, and tossed it into my backpack. When I straightened up, the coils inside were already twisting, like they had been waiting for me to notice. Another identical bar slid forward with a dull thunk. Third one. Same spot. Same brand. Now it felt less like a mistake and more like a dare. My reflection in the glass looked pale, stretched by the machine's fluorescent flicker. I tapped the glass with a knuckle. The row above was untouched, yet the same candy kept offering itself up, patient and deliberate. I told myself, it's 4 a.m., your brain's fried, don't invent ghosts. I couldn't help staring at that third bar, half expecting it to twitch on its own. I pressed the selection button again, half convinced the keypad would reject me this time. Instead, the machine hummed louder, like a refrigerator straining past its limit. The coils jerked, then stilled. Lights along the top row sputtered, dimmed, and snapped back on. For a second, the branding behind the glass blurred, letters bending and reforming into nonsense like the screen on a dying phone. The glow washed over my hands in pale green, then red, then back to sterile white. I squinted at the digital price display, but the numbers swam, rearranging themselves into symbols I didn't recognize. It wasn't English. It wasn't anything. I stepped back instinctively, rubbing my arms against the sudden chill. The hum inside the machine lingered in my bones, a vibration that didn't stop when I moved away. I leaned closer, trying to steady my breath. The surface of the security glass caught my reflection again, warped by the curve of the machine. Only, this time it wasn't just me. A figure stood just behind my shoulder. Tall. No features, just a dark outline carved out by the vending light. My stomach dropped as I spun around, and found only empty rows of plastic chairs stretching down the gate. The silence in that corner thickened. My pulse felt too loud, like it would echo off the tiles. Slowly I turned back to the glass. The figure was still there, perfectly aligned with my stance, but unmoving when I shifted. My reflection blinked. It did not. I whispered, "Okay, no. No, that's not real." But my voice sounded borrowed, like it had traveled through the machine before reaching me. The third candy bar sat in the tray, untouched. I didn't want to bend down, didn't want to break eye contact with the thing in the glass. But the machine had other plans. A metallic groan rattled through the coils, and the wrapper nudged forward on its own, just an inch, like fingers pressing it out from behind. The glass bulged a fraction, a pressure that shouldn't be possible. I stumbled back, heart slamming against my ribs. A hand, pale, flat, impossibly long, pressed from inside the machine, palm dragging against the inside of the glass. The chocolate bar slid free under its weight. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The thought cut through anyway, sharp as broken glass. Would you take the snack, or walk away hungry? I left the candy where it fell. My legs moved without permission, carrying me down the silent corridor, past the darkened duty-free shops, past the sleeping rows of gates. I didn't stop until I reached a restroom with a mirror I didn't dare look into. I stayed there until the sun rose, until people began filling the concourse again. When I finally boarded my flight, I told myself it was exhaustion. Just exhaustion. But 2 days later, checking my bank account, I froze. The vending charge had gone through. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. Each transaction logged from a different airport. Cities I hadn't even traveled through. I stared at the list, stomach hollow, as if the machine had followed me across state lines. And I can't stop wondering, the next time I swipe my card, what else will try to come through with it?